Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morin. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Hey folks, welcome to NHL Wraparound. Vic Morin along with Neil Smith. About 5.5 weeks left in the NHL regular season, and entering the new week, the cutoff for the playoffs. Tampa Bay in the East, 93.4 points is the bar that they are setting. In the West, the Vegas Golden Knights at 96.1. We're going to have a special guest, Mike Santos from Team 33. But first, a word from Migray.
From Howdy Hughes, from Bellevue to Bedard, we're your source for game worn jerseys. Go to migray.com, MEIGRAY.com to start your collection today. Get real. Get it from Migray.
Welcome back to Wraparound. About 2 weeks ago, Neil and I discussed 18 unrestricted free agents from teams outside of the playoff bubble and were more than likely to move or not move. So Neil had identified 15 players to be traded, 3 not to be traded. So Neil, you ready to take a good look at your scorecard?
Kind of worried about this, but go ahead. Let's see.
All right. So of the 15 players that you had earmarked to be traded, 11 got moved. Jake Gensel, Pittsburgh to Carolina. Tyler Toffoli, Jersey to Winnipeg. Anthony Mantha, Washington to Vegas. Eric Johnson, Buffalo to Philly. Vladimir Tarasenko, Ottawa to Florida. Chris Tanev, Calgary to Dallas. Jason Zucker, Arizona to Nashville. Matt Dumba, Arizona to Tampa Bay. Adam Henrique, Anaheim to Edmonton. Noah Hannafin, Calgary to Vegas. And Anthony Duclair went from San Jose to Tampa Bay. In addition, there were 3 players you identified that you said would not be traded, and they were not. The Islanders' Cal Clutterbuck, Jakob Silfverberg of Anaheim, and Mike Hoffman of San Jose. And there was one player that re-signed with his club to an extension, and that was Jordan Eberle of Seattle. And the only 3 players you said that might move that didn't, Tyler Johnson in Chicago, Brandon Smith in Jersey, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare in Seattle. So overall, if I had one of those Burger King paper crowns to put on your head, I would do it right now. Well done.
Well, thank you. After a while, and when Mike Santos comes on, I'm sure he's going to agree with me. After a while of looking at this stuff, after 20 years of looking at UFAs and that, it becomes a little bit obvious who has to get traded. And even with Brendan Smith and Pierre Bellemare and Tyler Johnson, I'm really surprised they didn't get moved. They're all 3 of them were really good playoff players. They'd be good depth players, and all 3 of them have expiring contracts. So, but you never know. They might have had no trades and not wanted to waive their no trades. But anyway, I'm glad we went back and told everybody whether I was right or wrong on most of these.
Well, you're the king once again at the trade deadline, and I look forward to doing this again next year with you. And we'll see how that goes when we get around to it. But overall, great job.
Thank you, Vic.
This one-timer segment has been brought to you by the Ninsel Wealth Partners. Our goal is to be your primary source of financial advice. Our mission is to provide quality strategies customized to your needs. We recognize that you place your trust in our ability to help you achieve your goals. To us, there's no greater honor, and without question, there's no greater responsibility.
Welcome back to NHL Wraparound, and now we have coming on to the segment Mike Santos, an old friend of mine. We kicked around for a long time in the NHL on different teams, never on the same team, but always had great great camaraderie between the two of us, maybe the same stupid sense of humor. I don't know. But Mike was with a lot of different teams as assistant GM. He helped a lot of GMs in this league and is one of the best player evaluators that I know of. And Mike, welcome to NHL Wraparound.
Thanks, Neil. And thanks, Vic. It's great to be with you.
I wanted to talk about Team 33 right off the bat and what you guys do and how you founded this company and what your idea was behind putting this together.
Well, I put it together with the help of a lot of experienced NHL people. And it's been things that I've put together for years, working with other clubs, working with the league, and trying to do things more efficiently. I think we all know that the league has become infinitely more complicated in the last 30 years as the collective bargaining agreement has expanded and grown. And now when we look at things and evaluate players, there's so much more to evaluate, whether it's contract status, whether they're an unrestricted free agent coming up soon or not, whether another team's picking up the salary amount of a player. And that all factors into the value that a player has to an organization or maybe even to another organization. So what I was able to do, again, with the help of many other experienced people, is put an NHL experienced staff that's non-biased. Because we don't work for a club, we have the opportunity to give a non-biased evaluation of a player, from his performance on the ice to how he acts off the ice, perhaps how his contract's evaluated, and we also have more of these people than an NHL club has. So, for instance, where an NHL club may have 3 or 4 professional scouts, we have over 20. What that means is we just get more information. We see the players more, and we're able to gather more information. And then ultimately what we try to do at Team 33 is try to provide the data in a more specific and useful way. With the age of analytics coming in, there hasn't been that real connection yet between what some people would call the analytics folks and the hockey people. And we try to provide that. So we believe our data can be used in a more hockey specific and useful way.
One of those ways that you do this, Mike, is to really take a good look at teams in the draft and free agency, and most recently, the trade deadline. So trade deadline passed Friday, and which teams intrigued you the most by either the moves they made or teams that didn't make moves? And let's start with the Western Conference first, because that really looks like an arms race going on out there.
Yeah, we looked at 3 teams in the West, in particular for this show today. 2 of them being the previous Stanley Cup winners, the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights. And the third being a team that we think really has a shot to make a run this year, and that's the Winnipeg Jets. Again, we try to evaluate at the trade deadline, not the old moniker, whoever got the best player wins the deal, because that's not necessarily so, and it's certainly not anymore. As I mentioned earlier, there's so many other things to consider. Every asset we look at, whether it's a player, a prospect, a draft pick, which has future value like a prospect does, and the other things that have value now too that I mentioned earlier is cap space. Are you taking on cap money? Are you giving away cap money? What's the contract status of the player you're trading or acquiring? Is he a free agent, unrestricted free agent that you cannot sign? If you're the acquiring team, are you acquiring an unrestricted free agent that you're only going to have for a short period of time? Are teams picking up any portion of the salary of the player that's being traded? And these things all have value in today's game, especially when it comes to the trade deadline. And, I know you've had Brian Burke on in the past. Brian once said about free agency, and I don't want to quote him because I couldn't do it as well as he does it. But Brian once said, we, meaning all the GMs, lose our mind on free agency, the first of free agency, and we overspend for all these players. And he's right. And I think that's also true at the trade deadline. There's teams that think they have a real shot, and they overspend to try to make a run at the cup. And so there's also teams that, we call them the sellers today, right? That are probably being realistic at their shots to win the cup or even make the playoffs, that are selling, and they'll take advantage of that. And they should. And that's just the way the marketplace works. So we look at all that information when we evaluate. And that's what we did here when we looked at the 3 teams in the West and then 3 teams in the East as well.
So in regards to the 3 teams in the West, because I wanted to start there first. So you mentioned Winnipeg, Colorado, Vegas. Based on your findings, does anything stand out in terms of their moves that, stuff that just jumps off the page and says, hey, these were good moves or maybe not so good?
So I'll preface this by saying most, if not all teams that are trying to make a run here are going to lose overall value when they make deals. So you're trying to lose the least amount of value as you can going forward. Colorado made 5 deals out of the Western Conference clubs. They gave away the most value. In our system, they gave away 687 points. And for those who are watching or listening, we have a 993 point system where an elite player would be valued at over 600 points. So when you lose 687 points in the overall scheme, you've basically given away an elite player. Now that might be over the long run, to gain in the short term. But we also look at, what caused that 687 point value drop. Well, they acquired 2 players, Trennan from Nashville and Walker from Philadelphia, who are unrestricted free agents. Are they going to be able to re-sign them? We looked at, for instance, the Rangers last year, who everybody thought did very well in getting Kane and Tarasenko at the deadline, but they were only on their roster for a matter of weeks, right? And never to be seen in blue shirts again. So, they've got 2 UFAs here, good players, but they're going to have to re-sign them long term. They also gave away a lot of talented players, in particular Bowen Byram to Buffalo, who's a very good defenseman. So they gave away a lot to try to, reinforce their club. It also shows me with the deals they made, because they reduced their cap, that they were maybe looking to make something happen that was bigger, but it just didn't come their way. And so now they're poised in the future with cap space, more cap space, to be able to do a bigger deal.
Mike, who do you think, or I put you on the spot a little bit here, but of the teams that are obviously buyers, obviously contenders, who do you think increased their chances of winning the Stanley Cup the most at the trade deadline?
Out west, the team that seems to have done the best job value-wise is Winnipeg. Winnipeg did 3 deals. Some people might have thought they were mid-level to a little bit above mid-level deals, but they were able to get Colin Miller from New Jersey, as well as Tyler Toffoli in another deal from New Jersey, and we included this deal in our analysis as well. It was done the 1st of February, and that is Sean Monahan from Montreal. They didn't give up any live bodies in any of those deals. Again, there's value for future draft picks, but they were able to give up a 4th round pick in the Miller deal, a 2nd and 3rd for Toffoli, and then a 1st and a conditional 3rd in the Monahan deal. And I also think that goes to another point that can't be overlooked, and that is, sometimes it's better to act early than wait so close to the deadline, you'll get better value in your deals. And that's what Winnipeg did.
What about the East? What intrigues you over there?
Well, in the East, of course, you have to look at, what everybody looks at as the big deal. That being the deal that involved Jake Guentzel to Carolina. And overall, they did pretty well. I don't think that they did the best value-wise of any of the teams in the East, but they did get probably the best player again. So maybe we're dispelling that notion that, that you don't always win the trade because you got the best player. But of all the players traded at the deadline or the month of before the deadline, he's probably the best player that moved. He also scores the highest. I mean, he's right under an elite level player in our program. And then they've got another player that could be at that level if he returns there, and that's Kuznetsov, who they got from Washington. But particularly in the Pittsburgh deal, they paid a premium. They paid a premium to get him. They gave up 4 live bodies, Bunting, Ponomarev, Koivunen, and Lucius. And then they also gave a conditional first-round pick and a 5th-round pick. So it's a lot of capital, in return to get Guentzel and Ty Smith. So they gave up a lot to try to get the best player in the deal. We'll see how that works out for them. And then, of course, Guentzel's another one of those UFA players. Is he going to re-sign there, or is he going to be there for a matter of weeks or months?
Mike, I want to focus in just on Vegas for a second, if you don't mind. I said the other day that the future may frown on the Vegas Golden Knights because of the amount of capital they've given up in this 2-year, 3-year area, trying to run for the Cup last year and trying to run for it again this year. What's your thoughts on that? How does their future look after all these deals?
They gave up a lot, for the future. There's no doubt about that. A lot of that for them their future is gonna, hinge on Thomas Hertl, which obviously was a great acquisition for them. But they also picked up some high quality players in Noah Hannafin and Anthony Mantha. But those two, and they also, I should mention, both of those deals, both Hannafin and Mantha, some of their salary is being taken up by the teams that traded them. However, both of them are also unrestricted free agents. So are they just short-term, are they short-term Golden Knights, or are they going to be here for the long haul, one or both of them? So they gave up a lot. They gave up, in the Hannafin deal, they gave up a first-round pick, Miramonov, and a conditional 3rd. They also gave up to Philadelphia in that deal a 5th-round pick. And then in the Mantha deal, they gave up a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. And then in Hertl, they gave up a 25 first-round pick, but they also gave a guy that maybe a lot of our listeners don't know, who's David Edstrom, a guy who played in Frölunda, a young Swedish player, was a first-round pick and has tremendous offensive upside. So when will that asset, how fast will he grow? When will he be at the level of the Hertl, if ever? We'll find that out in the future, but there's still value to that player. So I think Vegas is your typical team that they won the Cup. They don't know how long their window is going to be open, and they're trying to win it again. And so they were willing to give up a little bit more of the future because they believe they're in their window right now to win.
Mike, let's go back to the East for a second, and a lot of periphery pieces being added by the New York Rangers.
Mm-hmm. The Rangers actually did a nice job. Maybe a little bit different than Ranger fans are accustomed to, as far as not making the big splash. But they added, they added Roscovic from Columbus for a 4th-round pick. They added Ruedel from Pittsburgh, again, for another 4th-round pick. And then Alex Wenberg from Seattle for a 2nd and a 5th-round pick. I mean, all in all, they actually added value in the long run to their team. They were one of the few teams we looked at that added value. Now it was not a lot of value. I mean, but it might be the equivalent of a prospect or a call-up player in total. But they did add value to the team. Again, all three of those players are unrestricted free agents, so they'll have to decide whether they keep one, two, or all three of them, or none at all. Another team too that we haven't talked about, but we really should, for a couple of reasons, that actually added value to their club was Florida. Florida added a little bit of value to their club in the long run. They got pieces that I believe they feel really help them. You know, two guys that are heavy players, one in particular in Tarasenko that they believe can add offense to them as well. Now they're both unrestricted free agents. So whether they decide to keep one or both in the future, I don't know. But they fit nicely into their plans. Also, when I look at these deals, there's two things that strike me. One, again, Florida acted early on Tarasenko. My belief is they looked at what they had to give. They don't have a lot of first round draft capital because of deals they've made in the past. So, they looked at their draft capital, probably figured that they maybe didn't have enough to go out and get, say, a Gensel. So made the decision early that let's get a Tarasenko now, before Gensel's off the market and maybe the price goes up. The other thing that I thought was interesting about Tarasenko is he had a no trade clause or a no move clause, and that's coming into play more and more. Not only at deadline deals but all deals. We saw in the case of Boston, it was reported that Linus Ullmark, the outstanding goaltender, was to be traded, and the rumor was to Los Angeles, and he said no to the deal, which is his right. Players more and more not only have these clauses in their contract, but they're using them. In the case of Ullmark. In the case of Tarasenko, it's thought that, Florida was the team he wanted to go to. And again, he had that right in his contract. So he was able to direct himself a little bit, or direct Ottawa a little bit towards Florida. And people who don't understand the no trade clause, I mean, that's something that's earned by the player over time and experience in the league. And so they have the right to negotiate that. And there's different types. There's a no move clause, which the team is not allowed to move the player in any way. They can't put him on waivers. They can't send him to the American Hockey League. They can't trade him. And then there's the no trade clause where the player's not eligible to be traded at all. And then there's the partial no move or no trade where the player or the team designates, usually the player designates teams that they will accept the trade to or they won't accept the trade to on a list that's done when they negotiate. And the second part of that is the player has a right to negotiate that for sure. But the teams, I believe, have a right and an obligation to themselves to negotiate as well. Because as you see, it's coming in more and more into play. And sometimes if the team does a little bit better job negotiating that, they might have a little more freedom as to when they have to move a player later on in their tenure with the team.
And I think that that's all great info that you've given us, and certainly very inside for somebody that's been an assistant general manager for 3 NHL clubs. Mike, stick around. We're going to bring you back for a couple more questions right after this. Friday night, I was at a retro 70s party, and along with the shiny shirts, had the Door jeans on, and I have to say that they really helped augment the outfit pretty well, Neil.
Well, I know. I'm sure. I'm surprised you weren't at a 60s, party, but
we're getting
70s,
there.
I can get it.
Well, nonetheless, the Door jeans did look great with my shiny shirt, and just want to let our folks know that Door makes stretch performance denim and lifestyle apparel for men and women, and Door denim has 5 times the stretch of traditional denim. It's antibacterial, meaning less washing, and they're designed to last for years. It's time to level up your wardrobe with Door. Order your own pair today. Check out Doer's flagship stores in LA and Denver, or shop online at shopdoer.com/NHL fan. Right now, our listeners can get 20% off site-wide when you use our special URL. Don't wait to get 20% off. Go now to shopdoer.com/NHL fan. Shopdoer.com/NHL fan.
Well, we're back with Mike Santos, who's the founder of Team 33. And Mike has scouts all over the country scouting pro games, putting in evaluations, and they have their own system of ranking players and assets and prospects and that. And it's a fascinating company. And Mike, I wanted to ask you about the future of Team 33. Where do you see it going? Where would you like it to go? And what is the future for Team 33?
Well, again, we began as a company that was trying to do things for NHL clubs specifically. And we do have some NHL teams that use our software program. But where we're going now is hopefully to build a web-based program with an app that everyone can use. And so that everyone can use this product, whether they're, just interested in following their favorite team, trying to understand, what they can do, what they can't do, who they can acquire, who they can't acquire, maybe how they're balancing their cap. I mean, anything that really is done in the hockey operations department of a club. Or maybe they want to use it for fantasy hockey, to manage their own fantasy hockey team or those types of things. So we're looking to build a web-based program and an app. And anybody who's interested in investing in us, or certainly helping us fund the program, or maybe even have some technology backing that can help us build these programs, please contact us. We're at Team 33 Hockey on Twitter. And you can also contact me at msantos@hockeyoperations.org. This has really been a lot of fun because of the people that are involved. I mean, certainly both you, Neil, and Vic have been big supporters of us. And Neil, with your help on the advisory board. For those of you who are listening, we've got other people such as Serge Savard, Peter Mahavlich, former GMs like Jerry Meehan, Jack Ferreira that are on our advisory board. We also have a great scouting staff made up of former NHL coaches, managers, players, people like Michel Goulet, Dave Farish, John Van Boxberg, Rick Knickel, to name a few of our people. So, it's a lot of fun. I think we're doing something really good and progressive for the hockey community. And we're changing the way we're going to evaluate hockey operations, not only just player performance, but everything to do with hockey operations. I think, Neil, you could speak to this, that, for some reason, hockey seems to do things the same way for years and years, and the game doesn't stay the same. So we're trying to change the way we evaluate as the game changes, as opposed to just letting the game change and then evaluating it the same way it's been evaluated for the last 50 or 60 years.
Well, Mike, it's really informative stuff and fascinating program. Before I let you go, I know that you were with Nashville. You were with Florida, but I know you're also with the Islanders. And somebody asked me before you came on today, is that Mike's brother? That's George Santos?
No, I don't want to take any credit for that. No, please.
Well, we really appreciate you being on here, and thanks so much again, folks. Fascinating stuff. I find that out of the box thinking really fascinating. Mike, good luck with it. And again, thank you for being on NHL Wraparound.
Thanks to both of you.
Time now for a quick shout out to our sponsor. NHL Wraparound is brought to you by MyGray, your source for game-worn jerseys. Head to mygray.com to get your collection started today. Get real, Get it from Migray. NHL Wraparound subscribers can take 10% off any hockey jersey when they order at mygray.com and use the coupon code WRAP10. Don't forget that coupon code WRAP10.
Welcome back to NHL Wraparound. Neil and Vic here. And Vic, you were talking before the show started about the John Hynes pulling of the goalie in Minnesota on Sunday afternoon. Something that hasn't been done in the modern era is pulling the goalie in overtime. What did you think?
Well, I thought it was extremely high risk. A lot of people just absolutely love the fact that with a minute and 30 seconds left in the overtime, Marc-Andre Fleury was pulled in an attempt to get that second point during the overtime session. But in accordance to Rule 84.2 in the NHL rulebook, if you pull your goalie in overtime and you get scored upon, you lose the point that you had gained by getting into the overtime. And I can get this if you're in game 78, 80, 81. This is game 64. And I thought that this was extremely high risk, high reward. Now, on the one hand, the Wild were aware of the rule, and Hynes was comfortable with his personnel, with the setup. And so in that mindset, I think great. But this was not really the time for them, with still 18 games left on their schedule, to risk losing that extra point. So as much as people were touting it and saying it was a great move, I thought it was way too much risk, even though things did work out for the Wild in the end.
And then that's why it's a great move, because it worked out. If it hadn't worked out and they would have lost the point, then it was a dummy move. I think that's the way it is in hockey.
It is, but I'll tell you something. This situation is coming up again. And we don't know when it's going to happen, but teams are going to be onto it. They're going to shoot for the empty net. And I believe that sometime before the end of the regular season, this is going to backfire on the Wild.
Yeah, I don't think the Wild are going to make it anyway. So they can pull their goalie all they want. They're too far back in my mind to be able to get in.
Well, but in the West, there's a lot of jockeying for position at the top spot. So give us your take on that.
Well, there is. And you know what? You're going to have a complete war going on there in the first round when you have those 4 matchups in the Western Conference, and nobody is going to want to lose in the first round because everybody made moves, other than maybe the LA Kings. Of the teams that we know right now are going to be in the playoffs, and I include the Nashville Predators in that, they made moves. And all the way up the ladder, everybody made big moves. Everybody spent currency to fortify themselves for a run, and yet 4 of those 8 teams obviously are going to be out after the first round. It's going to be very interesting, very heated. And here's the other thing, Vic. So if you do come out of that first round and you're down to 4 teams, 2 more series to go in the West, how beat up are you going to be in the West by the time you get to the final? Whoever gets to the final, man, it's going to be a war of attrition to see if you can get there, because they're going to be pounding each other in that Western Conference.
And some of these games in the Western Conference between all of these teams have been absolutely brutal in terms of their physicality. So, I mean, these teams are playing playoff hockey from now. And the one thing that intrigues me above anything else here is if Winnipeg manages to win the Central, they're going to force Dallas and Colorado into a first round matchup. And I don't think a lot of people saw that one coming.
No, they didn't, and it's this league right now. Even when you go over to the East and you look at those teams, and we won't go into that right now, but there's going to be good teams knocked out in the first round. Teams that had good seasons, that thought their fan base thought we're a contender to win the Stanley Cup. They're only going to get 1 round of playoff hockey, and they're going to be gone. So we'll wait and see what happens and what happens leading up to the playoffs.
And certainly, as great as the Stanley Cup playoffs are every single year, there is absolutely nothing like that first round. And in about 6 weeks, it all begins.
Vic, you've got a story for the human side of the story this week, which I know means a lot to you.
It really does. You know, when people have asked me, well, what's the favorite night of your entire career or the favorite event that you work on? And a lot of people believe that, you know, growing up in the New York area and seeing the Rangers win the Cup in '94 was number one. But for me, that was as much relief as it was joy with you at the helm as general manager of the club. But my favorite event that I've ever worked in my career really dates back to me starting to watch hockey in the 1960s. And when I saw games from Toronto and Montreal, there was something about watching a game from another country that really resonated. And seeing games from Montreal, it even elevated that because there was the English, French, and the bilingual, and it was almost otherworldly for me. So right away, you know, there was an attraction to watching games in Canada, in particular in Montreal. And I had not been to the Forum or seen a game in the Forum until 1993. And I was there about 5 times during the course of their Stanley Cup run, which was something that was just absolutely extraordinary to feel the building, to experience the building, to walk through the Forum when the Canadiens were 5 minutes away from winning the championship and heading over into their locker room with this noise of anticipation of their 24th Stanley Cup. So for me, when they were going to close the Forum 3 years later, Monday, it is 28 years to the day that the Forum closed. I could not wait to work that event. And I had the privilege of writing the open, writing the vignettes, and then sitting back and watching this show unfold. And it was fascinating because, our coordinating producer, Larry Christensen, had a discussion about whether or not we should be taking the anthems because we didn't do anthems at the time. And they ran a recording of Roger Doucette singing the anthem, and sitting behind him in the production truck, I could just see the hair standing up on the back of Larry's head. And it was just such an unbelievable night. The game itself was relatively pedestrian. It was a 4-1 win over Dallas, but the purpose of the having the Stars as the opposition was so that GM Bob Gainey and Guy Carbonneau, former captains of the Canadiens, could be in attendance that night. And the ceremony itself was 45 brilliant minutes. I went back and I looked at it again this weekend, and I got goosebumps. All of the Hall of Famers were on the red carpet lining the ice of the Forum. Rocket Richard got a 7-minute standing ovation, which brought him to tears. And at the end, we saw the torch passed from captain to captain, starting with Emile Butch Bouchard and ending with the current captain at that time, Pierre Turgeon. So it was just such a spectacular night. And I was so moved that I wound up buying 3 Forum seats. So it was a night that I never forgot. And I know, Neil, you probably have memories from the Forum as well.
Yeah, I have many memories from the Montreal Forum, but like yourself, growing up in Toronto, when I would see a game from Montreal, Danny Gallivan doing the game with Dick Irvin and listening to that, there was a mystique about Montreal because of the French factor there. And then when I got to go to the Forum and got to see it, of course, it's just, you're looking around thinking, oh my goodness, I'm really in the Montreal Forum. And then I was lucky enough, I played in the Quebec League for the Drummondville Rangers, believe it or not, and we played in the Montreal Forum against the Montreal junior team at that time. I even got to go to the Montreal Clinic. They used to call it the clinic when somebody would get cut. They took them back to the clinic. I got cut in that game and had to go to the clinic. So that was, while I was in there getting stitched up, I was saying, oh my goodness, I'm where Jean Beliveau has been. So there's a lot of things when you go to those buildings, and especially in Montreal, the feel for it. The interesting part, when the Montreal Forum closed down that year, Vic, my New York Rangers ended up playing the Montreal Canadiens in the first round. And of course, where did we play? In the brand new Molson Center in Montreal. And although our Rangers record in the Forum in the playoffs had been pitiful, we did beat them all 3 games in the brand new Molson Center. losing the first two in Madison Square Garden and scaring the bejeebus out of ourselves that we could go out in the first round. But a lot of great memories. The other thing I will add to what you said is nobody does ceremonies better than the Montreal Canadiens. Nobody. Their historical perspective on things is second to none. They are just fantastic in doing that. While I was with the Rangers, I tried to imitate them as best I could by putting a historical perspective on everything. But I learned all of that from watching Montreal Canadiens.
I quickly wanted to ask you, have you been to the Canadiens locker room in the old Forum?
I think I was. I definitely have seen it, but I think I was in it.
That's one of the most remarkable parts of this is that when Butch Bouchard started out with the torch, he actually started in the Canadiens locker room. And there is that very famed passage from the poem In Flanders Fields that is in both English and French in the Canadiens locker room. From failing hands, we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high, with all of the heads of the Hall of Famers looking down on the current players. And that has been replicated now in what is now called the Bell Center. So just amazing memories, I think, for both of us regarding the Montreal Forum.
Well, before we go, Vic, I want to give a thanks to our sponsors, MyGray, UBS, Doer, and Ninsel Financial Partners. Thanks to our listeners. Please don't forget to subscribe or follow, whichever button happens to be on your screen. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Send questions or comments to NHLWraparound@gmail.com. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have a subject you'd like to see us address, send it to NHLWraparound@gmail.com. Join us next Tuesday for more NHL discussions. And we'll be 1 week closer to the playoffs.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.